Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jude Hung. Looking forward to this conversation, Jude.
Yeah, I am too,
Yeah,
especially since I didn't know we were having it.
indeed. It's an impromptu one. It's an impromptu one, ladies and gentlemen. So
Those are the best.
we've me and my wife have just come back from the Lake District, which is kind of mountain and lake district, part of the UK. So it's got the highest mountain in England, in Scafell Pike. So it's a kind of a walky place, and
Yeah.
there's lots of very high mountains for England.
Like what's the elevation? Do you know?
Uh, 3,000 meters. Sorry, no, 3,000 feet. 3,000 feet, something like that. So not
Okay.
super
Okay.
high in American
No.
in American terms, but in English terms.
I was only curious because I live in Asheville, which is up in the mountains, and we're about 26. It's not super high. I wish we were at 3,000. We're at 2,600 feet. Yeah. So yeah,
So
I see
part
mountains.
part of this landscape has been created by this ancient breed of sheep called the Herdwick sheep. So Beatrix Potter, the
Yeah.
the kids illustrator, and so
Yeah.
she wrote her she wrote her books in the Lake District,
Okay.
and obviously made a lot of money, or made enough money to buy a load of farms. And so she bought these farms and she bequeathed them. She left them in a will to so and so, to the National Trust, I think, who, and they have to, these sheep, these farms have to raise at least 100 of these Herdwick
Okay.
sheep. And my wife got a Christmas present, which was a sheep experience. And so we were talking about, Jude and I were talking about how we about energy levels and frequencies, and the fact that we kind of like we love our animals because we kind of synchronize with the animals around. Yeah.
Yes. So whenever we are with other people or other animals, our nervous systems are syncing up and influencing each other. And so for these animals like the sheep that have been trained, right? They're emotional support sheep. They've been trained to be calm. And so they have a calming influence on us, just like when we walk in nature. Everything is energetic and it is influencing us, and we also influence others. So that's why attunement when we were children was really important. And for many of us, we didn't have that. And so we have these dysregulated nervous systems, right? So we're learning to attune to ourselves now and to regulate ourselves now. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting stuff.
So I don't know whether they're trained as therapy sheep or they've just been around humans. They're not scared. They're not most sheep are scared of humans because we are
I see.
predators, I guess. Um, and yeah, this time in nature is expansive. It's healing. So
Yeah.
Wordsworth was the Lake District was a big inspiration for him, right? So that the poem that is I wandered lonely as a cloud, that's kind of from the Lake District. So this land has experiences in nature have that restorative effect, and it's been like that, and you get the grandeur of the mountains, and we are less significant, aren't we? I mean, I think. And so Lynn did this sheep experience, and she loved it. And I was sharing with Jude how the this book power there's a book called Power versus Force, by David Hawkins. I'll put a link in the show notes. And this guy, I mentioned it on the podcast before, this guy created a scale of human consciousness from naught to 1,000. And at naught is dead. shame is 20, which is obviously very significant for the
Yeah,
adoptees experience this shame, this feeling of not being enough, not being good enough,
right, because we've
being bad
carried that.
in some
Mhm.
in some way. And he also calibrated the wag of a dog's tail, and that's how we got into this subject about sheep um, and energy,
Words, energy,
words. Yeah,
emotions.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we're doing a webinar in a couple of weeks
Yes.
on language. So this is kind of an exploration of what we're going to be doing on it, so people can check out that sort of stuff. So
Yes, we were talking about why language is so important and impactful. And it started with that emotions scale. There's also, you can Google this and look up the megahertz, the frequency of emotions. There's a chart. And like Simon says, shame is low.
yeah,
Shame is low on the megahertz scale, and so is anger, fear, right? Love is kind of a midway bridge emotion that seems to connect us to the higher frequency emotions like joy, bliss, gratitude, and the highest they call enlightenment. And so the thing is that words, right? So what do words and emotions have? What's the connection? Is that our thoughts and our feelings are what create our state of being, but our words are how we express those things, right? We put words to our thoughts, we put words to our feelings. I'm going to share one that just this week has kind of come into focus for me and is is a hot topic or even a triggery hot button in adoption land is gratitude. We kind of grapple with it. And there was a beautiful article that I read on gratitude, and it was written by an adoptee, is very potent. We'll put that in the notes for this podcast as well, so you guys can go read it. And as I was reading it and remembering, she had a mantra: stay small, stay still, stay silent. I could really relate to that in my childhood. And as I continued to read it, I read it a few times and I thought, this isn't gratitude though, right? This is servitude. When gratitude is an obligation or forced upon us, that is not true gratitude. And what we are feeling in our bodies, because it's not gratitude, it's not the same frequency. Gratitude has a frequency, it has a signature, a thumbprint, and it's not that which we are calling gratitude in adoption land. That is obligation. That is something forced. And so we need another word for it because it's not gratitude. True gratitude is the spontaneous appreciation that comes forth, and it's a very high frequency feeling and it feels good. So, what we're talking about isn't gratitude. And so I thought, what an important like moment for me, this aha, this differentiation between what we're talking about and calling gratitude. And no wonder we're so upset about it because it's not gratitude at all. And it doesn't feel good, when something is forced upon us and it isn't truly gratitude, and I hope I'm making sense. I hope you're following
yeah,
along with me. So, and so for me, I'm a Reiki master, and so energy has become and been a really important guide because you can't fake that, right? Like true gratitude is like between like 500 and 700 megahertz. It's pretty high up there. And what we're feeling is something really low when we're talking about, oh, I have to be thankful, or this narrative of you must be, oh, you must be so grateful that you were adopted. And yet we have all this grief. It's incongruent. It's out of alignment with what we're feeling in our body, right? And so this is where words get really important, and where we can align with the truth that is inside of us, and then begin to alchemize it and transmute it and transform it, right? And then when we are grateful, truly grateful and appreciative of something in our lives, we can recognize that higher frequency feeling and lean into it, right? And go, that's gratitude. That actually feels good. And begin to amplify higher states of being. You know, a question that I ask in my workshops to people is, what's your baseline? Like, look at this emotional chart and what's your baseline? It's important for us to know our own energetic well-being. Like, where are we at? You know, are we kind of in that lower range in survival? You know, or are we, and when I say baseline, I mean on average, like what's that frequency that on average we're holding? Because life has its ups and downs, right? Like we're never, it's in flux. But where's our baseline? I think that's really important to know.
Yeah.
What do you think your baseline is, Simon?
73.2. I don't know. I haven't looked at you. I haven't looked at your megahertz scales, but I'm gonna.
Well, in general, like, are you kind of hanging out in that like love area? Are you, you know,
I would
joyful?
say. I would say out of 10, I'm largely an 8 out of 10. I would guess.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I, I don't always know, right? I I sometimes surprise myself. So I meet somebody. So I've been doing admin work and processing podcasts and doing stuff all
Yeah.
right, and I hadn't spoken to anybody. And I go to the swimming pool, and then I say hello to the people on the reception desk of the swimming pool, and I realize that, and they say hello back, and I realize actually, um, I didn't realize that I was. I'm having a better day than I thought I was doing. You know, so they've got this thing at the swimming pool. I'll ask them how they are, and a lot of them will say not bad, right?
Not bad.
And I occasionally joke with the members of staff that I know better, because I've been going there like 24 years, and a lot of them have been there a long time. So I'll say, "Not bad. Is that the best that you can do?" Or "Not bad. What's wrong?" Or like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, what is this not baditis? What is this not
not
baditis?"
bad.
No, and
Not bad.
and they look at me, what on earth are you on, Simon? And so I've been thinking my day is kind of a 6 out of 10. And then I I say something to them, and I realize, no, actually, I'm
Like, I'm a solid eight.
I'm a solid 8. I'm a solid
Yeah.
8. So I don't think I'm always the best gauge of where I'm at. But I want to take. What about you? What about?
I would say I'm probably a solid eight most days. You know, I have my days where I dip. It's taken me years to kind of get to that eight and have the capacity to hold it consistently. Um, you know, it takes us time to build capacity to make those connections. You know, I worked with gratitude for a long time, um and and other things, you know, but you have to kind of resolve some of those fears and shame stories and narratives that are living inside of you, right? And kind of incrementally build more connections in the higher uh, frequency feelings and build the muscles to sustain and that capacity to sustain it. Um, you know, one thing I like working with people on is that sensory awareness. That is how we're taking in life, is through our senses. And so to have the sensory awareness and kind of be attuned to those subtle energies and shifts within ourselves is really kind of fun and great work, because that's how we um, get more skilled at differentiating things like gratitude. Oh, that's not gratitude. This is gratitude. Like you know, we're knowing, we're differentiating all these subtle sensations in our bodies, the thoughts, and just it can be kind of a fun, engaging way of playing with life and realizing we actually have more power than we think in creating the life that we want to live and how we interact with life. And when we kind of get that going, it flows over into other areas of our life and other relationships, not just the one that we're having with ourselves in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The big thing for me would be having grace for ourselves when we're not
Yeah.
when we're below par.
The thing is even when we're below par, we're making judgments on
Yeah.
what is, right? And so I so wholeheartedly agree with that. I think when we're below par, when I'm having shame come up, it is me seeing a piece of myself. It might be a belief that I took in, or just a feeling in my body. And then I'm judging it and I start to resist it, right? Instead of accepting it as it is and kind of allowing it to flow through me, right? Like it's almost like the more I resist, the more it persists. And as I can love that piece of myself, love or accept, even if I can't love it, if I can just accept that that's there and sit with it. Sometimes I have a wise shaman friend who told me like when those things come up to sit down and invite them to tea and talk with them. And then I can, if I've had enough, if it becomes too much, I can say, this visit's over, you know, and kind of send them on their way. But there's so much that our feelings are trying to say to us. There's narratives within us that they're trying to help us see. There's limiting beliefs that they're pointing to, right? Misunderstandings about who we are, because our value is immeasurable. Our worth is not tied up in these feelings that come and go, right? These feelings come and go, thoughts come and go, and they really are not a reflection of who we are in our essence or of our value.
Indeed. So what came to mind was the difference between you talked about spontaneous gratitude and forced gratitude.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by spontaneous gratitude?
Okay. So spontaneous gratitude to me is that genuine love appreciation that bubbles up for something or someone. Um, like maybe those awe-inspiring moments where, you're looking at a view and it's just like, oh, that's beautiful. And then you feel like thankfulness for that moment. Thankful I got to see that. Thankful I got to experience that. I have so much gratitude for my children, right? Like, so, and when I feel that gratitude, because I understand the value of gratitude and that frequency and just being able to lean into it, if you amplify it by saying it out loud, writing it down, kind of just pausing and feeling into your body and connecting with the feelings that you're feeling, right? You're magnifying it when you do that. And so you're building neural pathways and connections for gratitude. And you'll experience more gratitude as you practice that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the forced gratitude is people telling us that we should be grateful. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, there's an expectation, right? Well, you should be grateful, right? But your story and their story are not lining up, right? And, you know, um, I know that I can take that in, and I know it's connected with being adopted and different narratives that I have um, used to adapt and cope and survive, right? Like to be a people pleaser that if somebody's telling me I should be thankful, my mind will be like, yep, you should be thankful. And yet my body's going, nope, nope, nope. Right. So we have to really learn to honor what's happening inside of us, right? And not just squish it down and to recognize that that's their story, right? And that's not our story. That's their story. Oh, and I think adoption's this, and you should be grateful. Well, that's your story. Thank you for sharing it with me. It's not my story.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
One of the things that I was doing whilst my Mrs. Lynn was on the sheep day, was I was reading Rebecca. She goes as Becca Wellington. She's coming on the podcast again soon. I was reading her book, which is called "Who Is." She just released this book called "Who Is a Worthy Mother," and it's a history of adoption in the US, and interwoven with her own kind of her own journey, her own adoption journey, and specific. It also talks about the death of her sister, and who was older than her, if I remember correctly. And it's giving me a real flavor of this, the reason for this gratitude thing, and why it feels bigger in the US than it does for me in the UK.
Okay, interesting.
And this is just my take. So other Brit adoptees may be told,
feel differently,
maybe feel differently, or maybe feel that gratitude. Because I've never been told that. Do you know? I've never been told that I should be grateful. I think
I wasn't really.
I don't know. You know.
So, but I know it's pervasive. Like I wasn't really either. That wasn't my experience, but I do know it's pervasive, and I did sense it outside of my family from society. I can say that. Like there is a societal narrative as well around this. Yeah.
And I think it may be something to do with the international flavor. So international adoption is bigger, than in the US than it is in the UK. So you've got all the Korean stuff, Vietnam stuff. You've got a lot of different things going on. And so that it's about it's about displacement. It's about it's post-war stuff. It's economic.
I think there's the white saviorism.
White saviorism
is there too. It's there,
and I think it may be from looking at it from a domestic perspective, domestic adoptions perspective as well. It may be something to do with the relative sizes of our social services. So I get the feeling, and this is just a feeling, right? So I may be wrong. I get the feeling that social services are bigger. Social welfare is bigger in the UK than it is in the US. So that gives you a clear reason, in inverted commas, to be grateful. Just look at healthcare and look at, we've got the National Health Service in the UK. So healthcare is free at point of delivery. You might have to wait for it for a long time, but it is free. You might have to wait for it in the States, I understand it. Just because you're paying for it.
It's getting more so that way.
So that might be the reason for this gratitude thing, because you're skipping the social inequality that you may have been subjected to. And she also talks about the transracial adoptee piece, and racial inequalities. And she also looks at Native Americans, Native Indian stuff, and that all is that was a big thing. So they had these schools, boarding schools, where they were trying to make Native Americans white culturally, and they didn't work. And that didn't work. They found out that wasn't working. So they actually started doing adoption, because they thought
Yes.
in okay, well, maybe it's something to do with the boarding school, maybe that they will feel more, they will become more white if it's actually within a family environment and a boarding school environment, also like that. So I
Yeah.
got that. The big thing for me about if we go back to the language stuff though, is
Hmm.
the difference between what we say and how we say it. Because
Mm.
what do they say? 80% of 80% of languages is in the tone. I don't know whether it's 80% or not, but it's not
Yeah.
what we say. It's the way that we say it.
Yeah. It's definitely nuanced, right? Like, because there's body language, there's word language, there is tone, facial expression. Yeah.
Yeah. So we came up with this idea of beyond the primal wound, beyond the primal
Yes.
wound, and language for healing buys.
Hmm.
Uh, and we're doing this within we're trialing this within the Fireside Adoptees group. So if you want to be part of this, ladies and gentlemen, then you need to be part of the Fireside Adoptees group. And we're doing
Yeah.
a free intro session on the 11th of May. So we're recording this 26th of April. And so what can you share about that intro section in terms of what how what we're talking about is going to be evaluated, discussed, explored within in this introductory session?
Yeah, the introduction is laying a foundation of why language is important and how it is powerful to create change. So we'll be going over some of the things that we were talking about today, but in more depth around emotions, right? Thoughts and feelings, and how we use words to communicate our state of being. And we'll also talk about narrative, story, the roles that we've taken on, and how we can really like become, we are the writer of our story, whether we have conscious awareness of that or not. And our stories are what create our perceptions of the world and how we interact with the world. So we can also become the editor of our stories and change them and shift things. And so we have more power uh, wielding change in our lives than we may have awareness of. And a lot of it has to do with our words and our language, because that is an expression of the beliefs that are inside of us. And that's how we move in the world, and that's how we react to what's happening in our lives. And so we're going to kind of be taking it all apart bit by bit and just building that foundation so that we can lead into um, the workshop for with using metaphor,
Yeah,
like creating our own metaphors.
because even the word primal wound, it's not empowering at all, is it?
No, it's not. And I think we were talking originally like either beyond the primal wound and beyond the fog, right? Like, so we have this primal wound, and that is a metaphor, and we use that, and it becomes part of our narrative as adoptees because we awaken to the truth of that story. It was already alive in us. We were living according to it, and now we have language for it. And it was a powerful moment when that became language for me, the primal wound. And coming out of the fog is another. I was already in the fog and awakening into this wound and understanding of this trauma that I carried. It was already a reality inside of me. It gave me language that felt empowering. And yet, where did it where what's the next narrative that I need, right? Like our narratives are primal wound and coming out of the fog, but I needed a healing metaphor, right? to go further than that. What's beyond the primal wound? What's beyond coming out of the fog, right? So um, those were powerful. That language that awakened something in me that resonated. I knew I had this trauma, right? Like once I heard it, I was like, that's it. That's the language I needed. This is the power of language, right? And coming out of the fog was also the language that spoke to my soul as to I had been in this state of not consciously knowing what I was carrying within me. And so very helpful and powerful language. But now what's beyond that
Yeah.
for me, right? What leads me toward wholeness and healing? What powerful metaphor or language can I begin using that takes me beyond that state of being that I already was in before that I got that language
Yeah.
to verbalize it.
So what's striking me is that the podcast listeners they're listening to this at the moment.
Yeah.
They're just taking our word for it. They're not they're not participating in it, because when we set out to look at this stuff, it was all about how we can make sure that it's a workshop that's where people aren't just sat there waiting to take in
Yeah.
our wisdom. What, like everybody's healing journey is different, but we want to
Yeah.
get them involved in taking that power back,
Right. That ownership. Mhm.
taking that ownership,
And
taking that
yeah,
ownership, and having that interaction rather
yes,
than taking our word for it.
yes. So we have a lot of interactive activities, uh, tools that they gain. And if the listeners notice, like the primal wound metaphor, the coming out of the fog metaphor, like I said, it was already speaking to something that was inside of us that resonated. And so the language gave us, right, like hearing those words, it gave us language to describe an experience we were already having. And so it is about that wisdom within each of us. As Simon was saying, our journeys are all different, right? We share a similar trauma. We share same trauma in relinquishment and mother separation, yet our journeys have been different. There may be additional traumas. There may be, but our bodies carry the wisdom, the keys to unlock and move us toward wholeness, toward our most authentic selves. And so the language, the most powerful language, Simon, I believe, is coming from within you. And so we want it to be interactive and use these activities to help you kind of tap into your own language for
Yeah,
healing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're familiar with internal family systems, this we're tapping into what Richard Schwartz, the founder of IFS, would talk, who would talk about uppercase S self.
Okay.
So this is about who we are at our essence, not the individual parts. So when you were talking about at the start of the conversation, you were talking about the shaman. That's what struck me, is that's really about one of our parts. Do you remember?
Yes. Yeah. For for me, because I've leaned into Carl Jung's work with shadow work and archetypes, right? Those parts that shame would be a shadow piece of self that we kind of tucked away because something happened at some point in our life and it was too much. And so it kind of separates and becomes a part. And as we uncover those parts, relate to those parts, accept those parts, heal those parts, they come back into the whole self, right? Like we are becoming our most authentic essence,
Yeah,
soul, wholeness, whatever language is your language for that piece of yourself.
It's
Yeah.
interesting that these things overlay, so you talk about Carl Jung, and he was the guy that said, until we make the conscious, until we make the
The
subconscious
unconscious,
conscious,
conscious. Yeah.
until we make the subconscious conscious, it will rule our life, and we will
Yes.
call it fate, right?
Yes. Yes.
So
Okay.
that is coming out of the fog, right?
Yes.
It's when the relinquishment trauma moves from the subconscious to the
Mhm.
conscious.
Subconscious. Right. Exactly.
And
That's it.
that's it. So these things are all it sounds to me like all these things are tying in, right? So we're talking about
Mhm.
IFS with Dick Schwartz. We're talking about what you talked about with from the shaman experiments. And we're also and in common with Carl Jung. These are all
Uh-huh. Well,
trends across
it
different
all is, right?
families.
Inner child work, that's a part, your inner child. And as I become more whole, because I've done inner child work as well, I don't talk to my inner child as much. Those pieces are becoming, those parts are coming home. And right, and I'm becoming whole. So there's less of those
Yeah.
parts, yeah,
So
to over time.
what we're drawing on in this conversation, in
Mhm.
the taster session we're running in within Fireside on the 11th of May. So this is 2024, listeners. If you're listening to this later
Yes.
than that, and also in the full course on the 25th and 26th of May, what we're doing is we're taking all these bits of these bits of wisdom and
Mhm.
these theories, and we're applying them specifically to each into our experience as adoptees, and
Mhm.
empowering the people on the workshops to write their own narrative, to take back their own power,
Yes.
using this wisdom of others that's that we're pointing towards an adoptee context. We're taking what is
Yeah.
general theory and making it specific to the adoptee experience.
Yes.
Because
Agreed.
IFS was not created for adoptees. Carl Jung was not writing for adoptees. Shaman, again, not writing for adoptees.
Yeah.
So there's what they say, there's gems that can be used
Mhm.
for our context, in our context, in our experience, but only if you can see the specific relevance of those. So
Mhm.
we're cherry picking the learnings, I guess. Are we? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, I think so. Like we're taking what has been really potent for each of us and worked for each of us. And separately, we both came to our own healing metaphors that were life-changing and really powerful. And so together, we both were like, yes, metaphors are a very potent tool, especially when it's your own coming from your within yourself. And because the language of the unconscious often is symbolism, and so or metaphors, right? Like so you can there's a quote that we have for the workshop, and I think it's Orson Welles, and it's something like you can say the most, like a metaphor is the quickest way to share the most truth, right? Like so it's packed with a lot of symbolic power. And so it's coming from your own unconscious, right, into your conscious thinking. It really has, it holds like a little key for
Yeah,
your path to wholeness
to open up.
and
Yeah,
to feeling whole. My personal metaphor has been a continual guiding compass for me. So that's what we're really hoping that people get from the activities and in their writing. In the first free session, we are sharing more detail in why the power of words and story are a great tool, and then in the 2-day workshop, we're helping people write their own healing metaphor.
Yeah. Because we haven't even mentioned this yet, but obviously Primal Wound, written by an adoptive mum.
Yeah. Hey, do you know where Out of the Fog came from?
No, I was going to ask you the
I
same
don't
question.
either. Yeah, we'll have to look that up.
Yeah. But I was thinking about Out of the Fog with the wandered lonely as a cloud, right? The Wordsworth thing. And that words have been big for me as a guy in publishing. But at school, I wasn't really into English. That wasn't my thing. So, but when we come out, as we come out of the fog, we're talking about being clear. But we don't even talk about what we don't extend. And one of the things that we're doing in the course itself is looking at, well, so what is it that we see when we come out, when we come out of the fog? And that goes back to, I guess, rewriting. You talked about editing the narrative, writing our own narrative, whatever works for you, listener. It's like, maybe it's about the way forward, because there isn't a lot in the Primal Wound about the way forward. It's not empowering. It's about understanding the past. And I think there's so much of this, like trauma education is most trauma education is based on a kind of an idea that understanding the trauma will lead to healing the trauma, and it's not. What we're talking about here is a healing path and healing education, not trauma education.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that. I was hosting at Fireside last night and I talked about words left unspoken. And often we are holding on to our words, not speaking them out. For me, it's often because of fear, a deep-seated fear of abandonment, rejection. And, but what I'm doing when I do that is I am projecting past rejection onto a present or future situation, right? Because I haven't even had the conversation yet. And I am basically saying, that's what's going to happen. So I might as well keep it in. But I don't know that that's what's going to happen. It may go differently, right? And so often trauma is reliving the past every time it comes up, whether it's in our thoughts, that kind of old program replaying, or in our bodies, right? We may have emotional flashbacks, but that's the past, and we're carrying it into our daily present now. And so, right, how do we move forward?
And reminds me of something that I saw on the. So we're running this. Some of those might know, but we're running. Been running this questionnaire. So I've been asking adoptees, some of whom have been on the show, some haven't been on the show. These questions. So what does healing mean to them? What's helped them heal? What healing moments come to mind? What healing? What stopped their healing happening? And we're exploring this advocacy stuff as well at the moment, and trying to ramp that up. And I got an email from an adoptee, maybe it was a message on Facebook, I think it was, and she was talking about she can't advocate, but because she's so scared of the response. And I thought, how many of us are like that? How many of us
Yeah.
are, you started about servitude, you talked about servitude and playing small,
Well, yeah.
playing small, and how this fear of how people are gonna ignore us, cut us down,
Yeah.
challenge us, and this fear of their reaction stops us advocating for ourselves and for our fellow adoptees. Right?
Right. And so we end up actually betraying ourselves, right? And we feel that. And that also can cause shame to grow within us, right? Because we're not being true to who we are. And if we look on the basis of frequency, I'll take it back to that, right? Our true nature and frequency is actually a high frequency. And so that's why it feels so uncomfortable when we are not, like when we're living in these lower places, like it's like, oh, something's wrong. I don't like this. I don't want to stay here, right? Like I don't want to feel this way. But it's like, how do I move to where I want to be, what I'm wanting to feel? Um, and you are also hitting on like the roles that we play by playing small, and they've been comfortable. And on the one hand, we can pat our young children on the back for helping us survive and get this far. And yet those roles are now limiting and they don't feel good anymore, right? Like there was a time that it served us and it had its place, right? So that way we can take the judgment out of it and not judge it. And it's funny because when I was young and I was doing these things, it didn't feel bad at the time because it was serving me at the time. But now it's not serving me and it feels yucky when I am in those places. So these roles, right? Like, so one of Carl Jung's work is the archetypes. One of the roles that we invariably have as adoptees is the archetype orphan child, right? And so that is kind of subservient in all these things. But in story after story after story, and we can see it in Harry Potter, the orphan child becomes the magical child. And that's very powerful because it's like one of the only child archetypes that transmutes and overcomes like and becomes something different. And so we can kind of unlock and access like if we lean into our own power of uh, transformation.
Yeah.
And that is through story, right? That's through narrative. So that's the power of language is the orphan child becomes the magical child.
And I think what uh, what she was doing, um,
Mhm,
I've forgotten her name. Author
mhm.
Harry Potter.
Oh, oh,
It's gone, isn't it? Come back to
yeah,
us in a minute.
yeah, well,
Collective amnesia.
how could that be?
Um, she's writing. She got so many rejections.
Mhm,
She was the Dementors that feature in that feature in the Harry Potter books are basically her inner demons, and
oh, okay.
and she was writing that at a low point in her life,
Yes, because
uh,
she was homeless, I believe.
and she was suffering from depression, and so what that's summing up this
J.K. Rowling. I had to
joking.
look it up.
Um, so what she's doing is, I guess Harry's playing out this role of
Mhm,
somebody who transmutes. Is
mhm.
that her? Is that a reflection of her own transmuting her
Yeah,
past towards the future and all the rejections that she was getting? Because that's what happens to authors, right? That is part of the course. They get their submissions, their manuscripts get
yeah,
rejected, and we don't hear a lot about, so if you look at Nancy Garrier's work, that doesn't inform anything going forward, does it? It's not.
Yeah, there's not the going
There's
forward.
no transmutation. There's no transmuting there.
I don't see it much. I see it starting to kind of eke out into the adoptee community, but there's not much narrative on overcoming or getting to the other side. And I think most likely because of when this all began at our origin point, it does feel overwhelming at times. It can feel like a lot. There's a lot in our bodies, so it's like it can feel impossible. And yet it's possible
Yeah.
to get to a place where we're really, even if we're not like completely healed, and I'm putting that word in little finger air quotes, you can't see me, but I am. Even if it's not that, I do believe that we can get to a place where we are enjoying our lives and we love ourselves, and we're here to enjoy this life. So if we get that, that's a win.
That's a
in my book. Yeah.
So it feels like a good place to bring it in. Listeners, so just to remind you, we're doing this free session within Fireside Adoptees, the Facebook group, on the 11th of May. And then we're doing this two-day course, it's just a couple of hours each day on the 25th and 26th. And so if you need any help on figuring that out, then get in touch with myself or Jude. And there's loads of links in the show notes to what we've been talking here. And I'm going to be diving into this frequency of emotions and seeing how it matches with the scale of consciousness, because I think that's,
yeah, I'm interested in that too. Yeah.
Thanks, Jude. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you.
Speak to you.
Yeah, thank you. That was a fun, spontaneous chat. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, listeners. Goodbye.